Hi, my friends.
Hi, friends.
Hey João, hey Norah,
Hi, guys. How are you guys?
fine.
Good, good.
Great. That's just great. So, guys, we're here to keep on going with our Paul and Stephen study. We're very happy tonight because our great friend Norah is back with us. She wasn't here last week, but now she's back. So we're very, very happy. We have reached a very interesting point in the book, very emotional moments. We're going through Stephen's death, and now we're seeing what Saul of Tarsus is looking to do with Abigail, what Abigail is feeling. We are in a very interesting and decisive moment in the book. Um, we have loads of interesting things to talk about tonight. And before we start properly talking about the book, our great Norah will bring us some prayer. We're going to get much more calmer, get more focused, and then we can get going.
First of all, thank you. It's nice to be back. And thank you so much. If it feels good to close our eyes, if not, just to tune into that vibration, thanking the spirits, Mother, Father, God, for this evening. We thank you for the resources, the opportunities, and the health to unite ourselves. We also want to take a couple of seconds to pray for the families of Uvalde, Texas, that have experienced a very difficult situation, the 19 children and two teachers, plus the entire community, that you bless their homes and strengthen and heal the hearts. We also ask that as we start this study today, as we're learning more about this book, and especially through Abigail and Saul, that we are inspired and that we leave with a refreshed heart, that we say Hail Mary, a prayer. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou woman among and blessed art thou among women of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. With that, we ask permission to begin the study, and so be it.
Beautiful.
Thank you,
Thank you,
John.
dear. So
Thank
much. Thank you so
you.
much. It's really nice having you back. So, guys, last week we read and talked about Stephen's death. We saw him forgiving at his ultimate moment, forgiving Saul, and saying that Saul was a good person because if he was defending the Mosaic law that much, and Stephen had this thought, what would Saul do when he got to know Jesus? How great would be him as a Christian? On the other side, we saw Saul of Tarsus telling Abigail that they no longer could have a future as husband and wife. Abigail was pale and painfully shocked, and then she tried, and that's how we start today, seeing Abigail trying to convince Saul to the contrary. She said, Saul, don't be ashamed on my account. Jazel died accepting you. I cannot force you to be my husband, but don't transform our affection into mute hatred. Be my friend. She was willing to have any kind of relationship with him. She just wanted him to be with her and not forget all that amount of love that they had. And then she promised him that she wouldn't tell anybody about Stephen being her brother, not even Zachariah and Ruth. This is very, very interesting, very emotional. I got really sad for her. Saul felt an enormous will to take Abigail in his arms. As we've seen before, he loved her very much. But then he started to think about his titles and duties. He saw Jerusalem shocked, blackening his reputation with bitter mockery. The future rabbi could not be defeated. The doctor of the strict and implacable law would have to suffocate the man forever. He was thinking those things. Then he told her in a very harsh tone that he would stop visiting her. She asked if he would forsake her forever, and he replied in this very harsh tone. He was very away from her. He told her that she would not be forsaken, for she had her family and other friends. She asked, why did he hate Stephen that much? What did Stephen do to him? And he replied, saying that Stephen was a preacher of the disgraced carpenter of Nazareth. And he added that he had humiliated him in front of the entire city. So we are seeing once again that it was all about his pride. At this moment, Abigail was completely silent. But we see here that she started to have another vision about Jesus Christ. This is very nice. She was thinking that Jazel, being so good as he was, could not like a criminal. So this Jesus should have something for her heart as well. This is very nice because at this point, I think the book brings us something really significant because we're seeing Abigail being taken far away from all her deepest dreams. And at this point, she starts to think about Jesus. And then we remember the gospel when Jesus says to us that he comes to all of those sufferers. Abigail remembered that Jazel, at his last moment, told her to look for Jesus Christ because in him she would find the Messiah, because he had that strong belief. She got really touched with that advice from her beloved brother, and lost in deep thoughts, she noticed that Saul had opened the door, calling some assistants who rushed to obey his orders. In a few minutes, Stephen's body was removed while numerous friends surrounded the young couple, talkative and happy. With all that sufferer she had to go through those conventions. After that, Gamaliel entered the room and told Saul that he was planning to leave for Damascus to meditate about all that. And then we enter a very interesting dialogue here. He also said that he had done what was needed to notify the Sanhedrin and the temple, and he believed that within a few days, Saul would be appointed to replace him. So that's the amount of power that Saul was aimed to be and to have. But Gamaliel said that he had one more thing to ask Saul. He told Saul that he regarded Simon Peter as a friend, and that he wanted Saul to allow Stephen's body to be buried in the Church of the Way. And he said that where the victim body would be treated with much love. And it's really interesting because he used the word victim. And when Saul heard the word victim, he got really surprised and he asked, did you use the word victim to talk about that criminal? And Saul says this: the existence of a victim implies an executioner, and I am no one executioner. I defended the law to the end. So that's what his mental attitude was always going to. Gamaliel told him not to seek the mark of recrimination in his words, but he told Saul that he had arrived at some profound conclusions regarding the so called carpenter of Nazareth. It's really interesting because going through the book, we have seen Gamaliel as this very loving man. Although he was Jewish and he had all that power, he was in front of the Sanhedrin and being heard and having much power. He had a good heart, and he went to those laws with much love and thinking that God expected something from him. He said that unfortunately he was too old. Gamaliel said this, that unfortunately he was too old to start any movement of renewal within the seat of Judaism. Saul was stupefied. Even Gamaliel seemed to be suffering the influence of strange sorceries. For him, there could be no doubt that those men of the way had bewitched him, sapping his last strength. It's very nice. At this point, Gamaliel read his thoughts and said that he did not want to cause any public controversy. He only wanted Stephen's remains to go to the church. Saul, at the end of the day, at the end of that conversation, granted the favor. He was already being started to get some conscious. Gamaliel said goodbye, sincerely grateful. Gamaliel went away feeling very grateful, alleging the need to change her blood soaked garment in that situation. And it's nice for us to be very unconscious that we're still talking about that moment after Stephen's death. And so Abigail, alleging the need to change her blood soaked garment, left immediately after the interview with Gamaliel. At Delilah's house, poor Abigail, she was taken with a high fever, to the distress and alarm of all those who were there. And again, we have seen her before in this situation. When Saul returned at nightfall to his sister's home and saw how Abigail was, he's just attended her wishes to go home, nothing else. He was really harsh. He was, at this point of the book, we see that he was all about being a public defender for Judaism. He only could think about his position when it comes to the law. And at this point of the book, at any moment, he felt like he could abandon everything for love. He was not thinking about that at all, although he loved her. Ruth and Zechariah remembered that only when her father died, Abigail got such a high fever. Saul heard them for some while, and then he went back to Jerusalem with the intention of never returning to Joppa again. And that's how chapter 8 ends. Now, then it will bring some more for us.
Thanks, João. So we start now the chapter 9, Abigail the Christian. And at that point, Saul took Gamaliel's functions after his retirement and ordered the most severe persecutions against disciples and sympathizers of the Nazarene carpenter. The house of the way started to be controlled by guards who would forbid uh, any sermons preached by Peter, and Saul's dreams were shattered, and he blamed Jesus and devoted all his energy to banish and arrest so many people that Jerusalem became scarce of workers. He arrested, he was persecuting women, men, healthy or not, old people, doesn't matter, and leaving even children without parents abandoned in the streets. He couldn't understand how his own actions led his life to disaster, and Saul was immersed in his thoughts about hating the gospel, Stephen's peace of mind in the midst of agony, and Abigail's forever lost loving figure, and some kind of growing gully inside of him, which suggested spiritual needs were multiplying. So this is despite his stubbornness. There's a lot of wisdom in Saul. He could analyze himself and detect there that there was something spiritual going on. He needed something to be done, and he decided get back get Abigail back. And he took his chariot, fast, always full of energy, like he was, and rode to Joppa while he was trying to figure out a way to convince that his love never faded despite the duties he had to fulfill. So he reached Zechariah's house and was very well received with a great hug from Zechariah, and got to know that Abigail had lung illness since she returned from Jerusalem, and that even deeply hurt, she always defended Saul's responsibilities, which made his mind completely blank. Imagine that Ruth was trying to uh, make Abigail feel better, saying that Saul was very ungrateful in accusing him of being, so bad to her. But she would always say, no, he had some responsibilities. He had so much weight over his shoulders. He had to take those harsh decisions, and that shocked him even more. Then Zachariah dropped uh, one more bomb. Abigail kept going while she could still walk to visit the peach trees, like when they were a couple. One day, a poor old man named Ananias started to talk to her and for several hours and handed her some notes about the teachings of the famous character of Nazareth, and saw another shock to him. He cut in the conversation, obviously upset, and said the carpenter. And then, and so what comes after this is with Nora.
Oh wow, that was quick. Whew, okay, let's go. So the next part, I
Sorry, dear, it was really really short
no
because
no no no.
there in this part there was so much poetry around, especially Abigail, and so I tried to
I was
focus on the facts. I
I was
know
just
it
getting comfy in my
it
chair. I
was
couldn't
short.
listen. No, that's good. I think I'll go ahead and do the same thing. I'll summarize, and then at the end we can most definitely extract because there's a lot. I agree. And the thing I always tell my students when it comes to poetry and figurative language and little lines like this, and we know Emmanuel loves doing that to us, right? We know we can extract a lot. So got you. Okay. So we go back to the same thing. Saul was talking to Zechariah, and again, he pretty much Zechariah tells Saul two things. One, I just want to let you know, Saul, Abby is not the same person anymore. She's been studying the Gospels or the teachings of the Nazareth, and we've been seeing some different um, outcomes, some beautiful consequences as of this. And the second thing, just to remind you that Abigail is very sick, right? And so it was interesting because Saul responds, "Well, why are you letting her be with those people? Like, what's wrong with you, right?" In common day language, which was interesting because he completely disregarded the part like, "Hello, Abigail is sick." He was more concerned again with that part of the law, as Jean said, and he was just, it's that pride. And so, anyway, Zechariah was pretty like, okay, so what's the harm? As a matter of fact, this is very healing. She's feeling good about herself. We see her coming out of this. Why not? Why not? Right? And then so he's going to take her to go see Abigail. And so, as they're approaching, the scene starts with um, Ruth again appearing, taking care of Abigail, which is very soft and tender. And then we get a description of Abigail. We can say she looked weak and frail, pale. But again, Emmanuel describing that her eyes just had that spiritual peace, which was very, very nice. And of course, Saul was in shock. Oh my gosh. On top of being in shock, he was very happy to see her, right? And so Abigail just very, very happy. And she just says, I've never forgotten you. I've never forgotten you. And so then they get into this dialogue. So then Saul's emotions, of course, they come back, and he's like, Abigail, come back, be my queen, right? Which was, this is a very romantic part. I find it so adoring that I end up with the romantic parts. And so now they're going to have this conversation. And so Abigail, just to track back, from the first part. When Abigail sees her brother, just so or Paul dead, we can imagine everything that she must have felt. And Saul, instead of being, her partner, what does he do? The pride gets the best of him. And so, of course, she loses a brother, everything comes back, the trauma. And now she has to deal with also the loss of the relationship. So that transforms Abigail. And we can see this, the way she responds. As a matter of fact, when we think the different chapters before, the Abigail that we kind of know, oh, Sao, you're my love, right? She was very like that. Now she's more mature. These teachings of Jesus are changing her. And she says to Sao, first, I don't know if I want to go to your home because earth is not our home. Two, I don't know if I want to be with your family because God, Jesus has called me to be his spiritual family. And she says, we cannot find happiness here on earth. Plus, I'm very sick. I feel like I'm at my end. But that doesn't mean I don't love you, Sal. Our soul will never die. We will love each other forever. So Sal was not expecting that at all. So what happens instead, right? He gets upset and again confronts her. Why are you doing these with the teachings of Jesus? And what's interesting, how can you do this to justify your suffering? Who is this Jesus that you look at you, right? And you're so sad and miserable. And here we go again. Abby was like, man, that girl is on fire. She says, who says I'm unhappy, right? I've come to learn, anyways, that there is no such thing as earthly happiness. Or happiness is, in the beyond and so forth. And so then I loved how she's ending this. And by the way, and I can see her just staring. I can imagine. I have using her imagination. She probably stared at him at this part and says, Jesus, he's not this sorcerer, right? He is a giver of consolation and life. His influence renewed my strength, my courage, and my understanding. It's a gospel of forgiveness and love. And the a section that we're going to end says that he, Saul couldn't hide it in his soul. Let me see. I think it says here. Hold on. Let me go to the exact words because they were very powerful. It says here, Saul could not hide the anger spreading in his soul. So it's not even like on the exterior. There's just something shaking up inside. It was like, oh. I'm like, okay. So it was powerful. And go, Abigail. Go, you girl, because you can imagine. We cannot deny the fact that she really loves Sal. There is just something. I think you said this too in the beginning, Jean, about how Abigail was willing to have any kind of relationship. So even in her, she's definitely having to make some amends inside herself. So let's get a couple of points here, if you guys don't mind, from this part. The very first one that we can kind of talk about is her sadness, because she does get sad to the point that she is sick, as Daniel also shared with us, right? Are we doing good? I'm not sure. Everything good? Yes? Because I can keep on talking and I go. Okay, great. So, thinking about her sadness, is it okay to get sad? Because I'm sure we've all asked ourselves as spiritists, um, can I get sad? I've asked myself that, like you keep studying and you keep doing the work and you're here for something, and then things happen. And does it make me weaker? Doesn't make me less of a spiritist. And I find it interesting how Abigail is almost this human experience, because she's so beautiful. She's a beautiful soul. She's very soft, but yet she's given time to grieve here. And I don't know, Emmanuel, I think, has been known to be a tough person. I've heard this before. He's tough, but I'm like, he's kind of being a softie here, bringing Abigail. He's given us some hints that sometimes it's okay to grieve, because she was grieving, right? And in the process, she got that spiritual help, though, from Ananias, right? So please, guys, feel free to say something. Okay, so all right, so that was very beautiful. And so I needed to hear that message, because think about what's happening here in the state of Texas with the shootings and the victims, and the reality of the American schools every day, what is happening. And I was feeling very sad, and I had a lot of conflict. And wait a minute, am I supposed to feel that? And it was okay to feel. It's part of our healing. It's part of our human experience, and we just let it go, right? But not dwell in it, because Abigail, what made it a point, as Daniel said, to speak hours daily, right, to heal herself. Okay, the second point is about, you know, and this is actually Saul asking her, well, why do you follow that if you're always suffering? And I have had people, I don't know about you, as for me, aren't you all this spiritual and you're always with all these things? um and it's true, because just because we are super spiritual, or we try whatever, it doesn't mean we're immune to our experiences. It's part of the process. We need to go, but it's important to not do this blaming thing, because Abigail didn't blame. She just took it, and, it's, oh, God doesn't love me. Oh, it's a punishment. Oh, it's from another life. Again, this is just my perspective. It could be different for many people, but in my sense, even I find myself, oh, well, did I do something in a past life, and that's why I'm like suffering? I'm going through the, and we fight, because it's not the blame, it's the behavior, I think, that we can extract, right? Abigail's behavior was different. It's okay, just because we go through something, trust it's going to work out. Another point, relationships are very complex. Saul and Abigail have a lot to work on. And the last thing is that beautiful definition of Jesus that she has. It's absolutely beautiful. It's of comfort, peace, healing, and strength. But Saul wanted to make this Jesus a religion, a cult. But Abigail always put him straight. He's not that way. It's an experience. And to end with this is exactly to have spirituality as an experience to help us to heal, to move forward. And I think that was such a beautiful dialogue. And it was a different Abby. And it was like, yeah, so it was gorgeous.
Beautiful, dear. So beautiful. I think it's really interesting that you brought this about Jesus, not in that perspective in which Abigail was immersed, that Jesus is not a religion, because Kardec brings us this question in a speech that he gave in 1868, when he starts with the reflection, is Spiritism a religion? And then he brings us that Spiritism is not a religion in those traditional terms, but it is a religion, and it can be understood as a religion when it comes to this bond that it makes us have with God, this much stronger bond when we understand the laws that govern the spiritual and the material plane. I have a couple of things to talk about here. It's very nice because they talked about her eyes. Although she was going through much difficult things, she was suffering a lot, she was weak, she was sick, but we hear them saying that her eyes were full of life, her eyes were always full of hope, because she had found another treasure, the gospel. And this is so beautiful. And on, on Matthew chapter 6, verses 22 and 23, we have this: the eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are good, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? This is very interesting, because we see that despite every single thing she was going through, her body was full of light. She had already reached that point where those suffering situations which she was going through, they couldn't disturb her spirit anymore, because she had found a treasure that was above and could overcome every single difficult thing. And a very interesting thing here is that they were always Romans and those Jews always reflecting on how those Christians could be happy despite every single thing they went through. And it's interesting because Norah brought this reflection made by Sal, where he looks at her. She is sick, she's weak, she doesn't have anything to be happy for, but despite all that, she is feeling happy. She's feeling good. She's fulfilled with hope. And then the gospel according to Spiritism brings us a really interesting text and reflection about this postulate that Jesus brought us: blessed are the afflicted. And when we are looking with material eyes, we can't believe that. How blessed are the afflicted? Because the afflicted are those that are suffering a lot. So, how can they be blessed? And then Jesus brings us this new perspective, and we need to believe that there's something more, there's something else. Spirituality will bring us another perspective, another hope. I'm going to read a very short part on the gospel according to Spiritism. On chapter 5, we have this reflection: blessed are the afflicted. And it starts like this: who then is responsible for a man's afflictions if not man himself? So then, in a great number of cases, he is the cause of his own misfortunes. But instead of recognizing this fact, he finds it easier and less humiliating to his vanity to accuse his bad luck, providence, or even his unlucky star, when in actual fact his unlucky star is his own carelessness. When reckoning with the misfortunes of life, suffering of this nature undoubtedly forms the greatest part of all vicissitudes. Only when man works at bettering himself, both morally and intellectually, will he be able to avoid this category of suffering. Human laws cover various faults and prescribe punishment. In these cases, it is possible for the condemned man to recognize that he is suffering the consequences of the wrong committed. But the law does not or cannot reach every wrong. It falls principally upon those who cause damage to society and not upon those who only cause damage to themselves. God, however, does not allow any detour from the straight and narrow path to go unpunished. There is no wrong or infraction of his law, however small, which does not carry with it the inevitable consequence, which may be more or less deplorable. From this, it follows that in small things, as in great matters, man is always punished according to the manner in which he has sinned. The suffering which follows is always a warning that wrong has been done. This offers him experience and makes him feel the difference between right and wrong, good and bad, so that in the future these sources of bitterness may be avoided, but without which there would be no motive for betterment. If man were to be confident of immunity, he would only delay his own progress and therefore his future happiness. Nevertheless, sometimes experience arrives rather late when life has already been wasted and become disordered, when strength is already spent and the person is no longer able to remedy the wrongdoing. The man will frequently say, if I had known then what I know now, how many false steps would have been avoided? If I had to begin again, I would act differently. But now there is no more time. Like the lazy workman who says, I have wasted my day. He also says, I have wasted my life. And the sun rising on a new day allows the worker the possibility of repaying any lost time. So it is with man that after a period of time in the tomb, a new life shines forth, which will enable advantage to be taken of past experience and good resolutions for the future to be put into practice. This is very nice because this reflection, we see that when Abigail, she got to know Jesus, she was fulfilled with that hope that she would have more time somewhere else, someplace else, sometime else, and that she would be happy someday because she was already feeling a very spiritual manner, and she could believe those postulates that Jesus brought her from Ananias, as Daniel told us, and with that she could look to all those death moments that she was going through and think that they would pass because she's a spirit, and someday she would be happy, full of hope, and in a new perspective. And maybe as we've talked about here, maybe she was already being informed about reincarnation. We know that Bible translated the gospel in many different ways. Maybe she was already waiting for her new life, where after going through all those suffering moments, she would rise like a flower and be happy again. Do you guys want to say something?
Sure. First, that's very sweet. And second of all, I mean, just to put everything that you've read in like, just everyday language, we could come to it, at least my perspective. Everybody might have a different view, but, happiness is more complex than just what we see, in books. And I mean, reading books, seeing movies, it's very different. I'm gonna say a personal story if you don't allow, if you will allow me, because it kind of has to do with this. Well, we'll see. Let's see. So when I'm finding myself overwhelmed, and I think a lot of us, we need to like channel the energy so that we don't keep it, stagnant. So one of the things that I mean, I love to do is read fiction all the time. I'm always studying for college. I'm studying for when I'm teaching. I'm starting for cardiac radio. I fall asleep watching the movie, so I found out that if I read a book, I'll stay up. And so I made this comment to a friend, hey, I'm reading this fiction book. It was a romance book to top it off. Everybody's like, what? Yes, I love to read romance books. It's a great pathway, whatever, just. And so then she sends me a message back and says, because I'm single, I've been single for a while and I'm fine. And she's like, are you lonely? I said, why would you do that? You just recommended a romance fiction book. Okay. I said, I'm not. There happens to be a part two of the book. I said, I'm already on part two. This book it's amazing. And this person says, you see, you're not happy, because if you were happy, you would not be reading romance novels. You're looking for someone. And it's so interesting to have this comment made at me, because I was like, wait a minute, actually, I am happy. I'm reading this because it's funny and it's fun. I don't want to, analyze this. And I said, but the Nora, maybe 3 years ago, that Nora would have been like, I need to be in a relationship. I need to be with someone. I am lonely. I don't feel complete. And perhaps I voiced that. But when I started, with the pandemic from 2020 and on, I started studying Spiritism more than before. Dude, all of a sudden, you find yourself like, I'm not really feeling that. It's not that I don't want it, it's just don't feel it. And so happiness, it's a very relative state of being. And I felt like Abby too, I'm sure she mourned the loss of that relationship with Saul. It hurt her. Of course she was in love. But it's like that movie Eat, Pray, Love. Okay, I do stay up for that one, right? She went and found herself, right? Or the book, there's a book. It's the same thing. Abigail actually had to find herself in that inner state of her self love, self fulfilled, self everything was what made it come through. And having that relationship, um, with Jesus and with God, it was beautiful anyway. So that's what I wanted to share.
Yes, bro, do you want to say something?
This is great because everything I wanted to point, you guys talked about. This is this is great. This is connection. Um, the the Gospel according to Spiritism is the second book of the Spirit codification, and this part, the True Silas, is a chapter which teaches us about analyzing ourselves and what happened to all the story about Saul made me think of this because he made so many bad choices because of pride. Um, well, this is pride was his main reason, but from person to person it may vary. Uh, but the bad choices that we make is the point. The true solace is what you call all the suffer you cause to yourself. And every time that some suffering strike us, we start to wonder if that's God's will, if somebody if there's somebody for me to blame, or like Nora said, it comes from another life. This is some reincarnation issue, and we should have the first think we what we should think in first place should be, um, am I doing the bad choices? Am I doing wrong with my own life? I went to therapy once, and uh, the therapist told me something very interesting. I was talking about myself, and she said, "Well, so you're used to think about your thoughts." And I said, "What? Think about my thoughts? That seems a little bit complicated." But I now relate it to like preventing yourself from doing bad choices by analyzing your feelings and your thoughts before you do actions, before you do before you to commit something and say something. Well, this is the true solace that we see Saul collecting and feeling on his skin, on his soul, so deeply hurt, and always searching somebody to blame. Was it Stephen? Was it Abigail? Was it Jesus or Peter? But he never considered he could be the author of his own suffering. That's such a powerful lesson for all of us to always keep in mind, to always remember. That's it.
Great, bro. Just great. Um, I do think that, and the book brings us this subtext that the fruits of pride are regret and all those bad feelings. Another thing that I wanted to point here before we finish is that the title of chapter 9 is very significant because it's Abigail the Christian. So we when we analyze those steps through which she goes here, we see that we are having here by Emmanuel a model, right? We are having the Christian, a Christian to which we can look and inspire ourselves. So we have this title, Abigail the Christian. So we saw that Abigail, she's in a very different position from where she was a couple of chapters ago. Although she went through very harsh things when she was younger, she reached at some point a very comfortable place when it comes to material happiness. She was with a family. She had that great fiance that she loved a lot. She was pretty. We saw that she was pretty. She was young. So when we look at that perspective, when we look at her, she had a very stable, comfort, and happy life. And then she went from that to this life where she had absolutely nothing and she lost even her health. She was sick. So loads of suffering. But despite all that, we see this young woman here fulfilled with resignation. Um, and then finding happiness someplace else. Oh, she was wherever she would not find happy in those material terms, but she was feeling happy because she had found something else. So it's really interesting for us to see here, and this chapter's title is really significant, that there is a change of paradigm here. We go from materialism to spirituality, and this is what we see with the three revelations, and we have already talked about that here in our study. So we have the Mosaic law, and then they bring us the revelation that there is only one God. Then we have Jesus to tell us that love is actually the law above every single thing, and then we have Spiritism to teach us all those laws that govern matter, and the relationship between matter and spirituality, and Spiritism being the counselor, the promised counselor. And it's really important for us to say here that we are reading a spiritist book, so we see this paradigm, this spirituality, as a paradigm here in these characters, in these Christian characters. And when we go through the gospel according to Spiritism, we see Kardec at some point telling us that a spiritist would be a truthful Christian, a person that really follows Christ in those just and honest steps. So it's really interesting for us to see that this title in this chapter, it has a very strong message, because we're seeing a very tough situation, and a girl, a young woman, dealing with all that with much hope and resignation, and it's telling us that this is what being a Christian is actually about. Although we go through difficult times and in life, and we all go through that, we will find hope and a treasure that nobody can take away from us in Jesus Christ, and of course in Spiritism. Do you guys want to say something else before we finish here?
I would like to read something, so I don't know if Daniel wants to say something first. No, actually, I wanted to read something, a Psalms from the Bible, because thinking about Abigail and her experience, like you said, João, so eloquently, about just being a Christian, human experience, having that hope. Psalms chapter 16, verses 8 to 11, it says, I have set the Lord always before me, because he is at my right hand. I will not be shaken. Therefore, my heart is glad and my tongue rejoices. My body also will rest secure, because you will not abandon me to the grave, nor will you let your Holy One see decay. You have made known to me the path of life. You will fill me with joy in your presence, with eternal pleasures at your right hand. And that's that you talk about that Christian experience. It's just like a little beautiful prayer that we can do just to send it out. Yeah. So it was a beautiful
Beautiful,
chapter so far.
beautiful, yes.
I was almost crying. I was like, oh my God, no.
Yes, this book, every time I read this book, I cry a lot. And I love that you brought some psalms for us to finish, because as we've seen, we have Christian perspectives and Christian values everywhere, although they are not called or entitled Christians. And this is the most powerful and beautiful things. I want to thank you guys so much for being here with me. I'm learning a lot with you too. I'm very grateful for you both. I want to thank everybody that is here with us still this late studying with us, and thank everybody that is watching us. I have seen that the study is growing on the YouTube channels that the study is going. I'm very, very, very grateful, and to everybody that is in this journey with us. Thank you guys so much. I see you guys next week. Okay,
Bye.
Bye,
bye
guys.
bye. See you.
Ciao, ciao.